welcome Gina Bianchini of MightyBell and Roy Gilbert of Grockit to the stage.
Exactly before lunch, but I'm thinking we might be.
Well, we'll hold lunch until we're done.
Okay, well, I was going to take a little bit of a different approach, which was hopefully we'll be able to make this as interactive as possible. One of the things that I am so grateful for in the Bay Area, in Silicon Valley, working in technology is actually the community of entrepreneurs and the community of former entrepreneurs, operators, and current entrepreneurs that we get every day the opportunity to talk to, share notes, share the highs, share the lows, share the opportunities, share the challenges. And it's one of my favorite things about Roy. But now as I'm sitting here and thinking about it, what's been even more exciting to me is, in addition to the density of entrepreneurs here in Silicon Valley, the density of an amazing group of entrepreneurs from all over the world sitting in this room right now. If we are not doing questions and an open conversation in the next 7 minutes, we will have failed. So hopefully we'll go ahead and get started. But you guys have questions, ideas, thoughts, things we can share in just a really open conversation. That would be certainly my goal and my hope for our time together today. So maybe with that, we can get started. Oh, hey.
How did we meet?
Yeah. So speaking of a community
Yeah.
of entrepreneurs, I actually met you because I was talking to a friend of mine, and I was running at the time and asked a friend who was the COO of a large company, who are like the best people that I should be meeting for this operations role that I had. And she introduced me to about 6 people, I think, at the time. And one of them was Roy. And he walked in and asked me some of the most interesting point blank questions that I had been asked by anybody interviewing. And I immediately fell in friend love with Roy. And
Yeah, well, I had been working for about 7 years at Google in a variety of operational roles, and was trying to think about what I wanted to do next. And this mutual friend said, "Oh, the entrepreneur you should talk to is Gina." And went in there late in the middle of the week. It was dark outside and rainy. Everyone else had left for the day, and so Gina and me in a conference room, and quickly established that I didn't want to do the job, but she
Great
ended
job,
it.
but.
It was a very good job, but she ended it and said, "You know what? You and I, we're gonna be friends." And I walked out and said, "That is the weirdest ended an interview that I've ever had." But sure enough, Gina and I probably meet a couple times every month over coffee at Mayfield and talk about everything. So this is kind of what, in personal, professional challenges, triumphs, whatever, and I feel like we've been through it all over the past several years.
And I think that's actually one of the things that I was really excited to talk about today, and what we were going to spend some time on is just the power of friendships, the power of, we talk about it so often as the ecosystem or the networks and networking. And I actually want to challenge us to take it one step further, which is really the community. And a community of entrepreneurs that are learning from each other and that are making each other better in sort of this way of both competition, but also this competition, but at the end of the day, it's not necessarily the head-to-head competition, especially where technology markets are moving, but really this idea of how is the community in which you live in making you better and better and better every day. And one of the things that I'm so grateful for, and what we've had an opportunity to talk about, and maybe you can share a story, I can share a story, is the resilience, this sense that we have this narrative today about technology entrepreneurship, or even just entrepreneurship, of the visionary. And the visionary narrative goes something like this. Young man, typically it's a man, woke up one day and decided that the future of the world was going to be mobile, or the future of the world was going to be social networks. And this person persevered against all odds, never deviating from their original idea, never listening to the naysayers around their original idea. And lo and behold, they created a $10 billion or $100 billion company. And that is how we narrate. That's the story of success so often in Silicon Valley. And first of all, I'm not sure it's ever been true. And second of all, what I think is even more important today is that in a rapidly changing environment where things, the number of platforms you need to support, native apps versus which browsers that, how far back in the browser, ecosystem are you going to go in terms of your application? Who and how are you going to focus? Where is your competition coming from? It's no longer just, another subset of people in Silicon Valley, but it's from all over the world. And I think what we're moving to is a narrative of the fast learner and fast learners and experimentation and learning and how quickly you can create those cycles being so much more important than the technology visionary story. And it's one of the things that I'm so grateful for is the fact that, when you can talk about your failures, when you can talk about your challenges, when you can talk about something that you just learned with other people in an environment that is supportive and focused on problem solving as opposed to one-upmanship, there is something incredibly powerful because this is not a zero-sum game that one person wins and someone loses.
Well, even between us, there's a bit of one-upsmanship about who had the biggest and most ugly failure, learned from it the quickest, and then moved on. And I think that this, this narrative about who has this amazing vision, never deviates, moves on, and builds this billion-dollar company is, one, it's convenient and it's pat, but it terrifies people from being entrepreneurs. And it frightens young women and young men from going out and taking significant risks. But working with Gina, working with other entrepreneurs, I mean, the one thing that I've seen in common is that it is less of a process of having a compelling vision that you build towards, and more of being an amazing scientist, of taking little risks, seeing what works, what doesn't, and then refining your experiment over and over until many times you're doing something completely different than what you thought you would start with.
And this is actually interesting because you went from being at a big company and working on very important initiatives within the context of Google to running a startup. What was that like?
Well, it was terrifying. And Google was not always a big company. I mean, one thing that I learned from Google was watching this process of, we're going to push hard into this, and whoops, that didn't work, so we're going to try something else, and oops, that didn't work, we're going to try something else, and all of a sudden it's an amazing business. My process from going from a company which was, you talked about matrixed organizations and international operations to one with like 15 people in a room trying to figure things out was amazing. And I think what the two had in common was, again, this sort of experimentation and taking and trying new things. But for me personally, for making that transition, I talked about this often with Gina, it was gut-wrenchingly terrifying. Because at least, in a large company, you know that you will probably get paid in 2 weeks. Whereas in being an entrepreneur, that risk of failure is somewhat higher. But it has worked out well over the past several years.
And you guys recently made a shift.
We had a huge change. I mean, so Grockit started out as this company that's focused on social learning. This idea that people learning from each other are more effective than people just sitting in a classroom absorbing from a teacher. And the founder, Farb Nivi, who's now the chief product officer, and really like an amazing, compelling entrepreneur, who has a whole interesting story of dealing with adversity and being resilient, but started it around preparing people for test, and then someday we'll move on to other things. Well, we did the someday we're moving on to other things last year, in a huge transformation of our product, transformation of our organization, that involved like raising more money, building a new product, finding new customers, all in the space of about 6 months. Which again sounds like that we had some sort of incredible vision, but there are many times that Farb and I would take these long walks around South of Market in San Francisco, where we just looked at each other and said, I don't know what we're doing. I don't know what we're doing next. What happens next? And then hopefully by the time we got back to the office, have an idea of sort of the next immediate step or the next immediate measurement that we could take. But the ability to ask those questions and then laugh about it and then move on and get the team motivated behind it is the mark of a visionary like Farb and an entrepreneurial executive.